Okay. Hello, Ina. Welcome to our small channel called Detective Malayalam. So
Thanks for
basically,
having me.
yeah. So just to give a background on who you are, from what I know. So I've been observing your Twitter activities and your podcast since I believe since from 2014 around that time.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
so you've been very vocal. I mean, you are quite familiar with the new atheist scene. You have interviewed Sam Harris and Mariam
Yeah.
Namasi and a few people like that. And there was a change, there was a shift. So
Yep.
basically, uh, running along with the new atheist movement, but at some point you realize there is something wrong here, and you distance yourself and you become a very vocal critic of the new atheist movement. And it's been fascinating how the new atheist movement started and where it ended right now. So just wanted to talk to you about all this experience that you had with New Atheist movement. And along with your experience, we would like to share our own experience in our small state in Kerala, in India, south of India. There is a small New Atheist movement here as well. There are the parallels of the New Atheist movement in the Western sphere and our small state called Kerala. It's very fascinating. So just wanted to share those interesting, insights with you as well. So just to give a background on who you are, can you tell us who you are? I just know that you are from you lived in Saudi Arabia and you are an ex-Muslim. Just but you'll be the one to elaborate on it.
Yeah. So I grew up in Saudi Arabia, but I am of Pakistani background, and I moved to Canada, I think, like when I was a teenager. And I think my falling into new atheism had a lot to do with growing up in a strict theocracy. So that rigidity and religious oppression. Being a woman in Saudi Arabia, there was morality police there when I was growing up, and they would enforce like headscarves and abayas, which are the black cloaks. And I think that had a very strong influence on me. So when I got out, I had a lot of feelings and trauma and anger. And the new atheist scene, when I came across it, seemed like a wonderful cathartic experience, a place for me to just be open about how angry I am about the way I was treated by religious fundamentalists and how dangerous it can be
Right.
to subscribe to religious conservatism. And
Were you aware of the problems while you were in Saudi Arabia, or did you realize, oh, it's been bad when you got out of there?
The problems in Saudi Arabia, you mean? The
Yeah,
religious yeah,
yeah.
like, my family is not very conservative,
Hmm.
and I grew up as an expat, right? So in Saudi Arabia,
Hmm.
if you're not Saudi, like, if your parents and grandparents aren't Saudi, you are not, um, included in Saudi society. So there's always, like, a degree of separation. And so we go to different schools and we live in compound, well, not everybody, but many expats live in compounds, which are like these communities where the rules inside the walls are more lax, but once you leave the compound walls, you're like faced with the harsh realities of Saudi life.
Hmm.
And so there was a degree of separation. And, I went to an international school. All my teachers were like Canadian, British, and American. And, we socialized with the international community. There was a big South Asian community in Saudi Arabia. So I didn't really have many very personal encounters with
Hmm.
Saudis because society is kept that way.
Yeah.
However, a lot of my critics like to say that that means that I am not a valid voice when
Yeah.
it comes to critiquing Saudi Arabia. And My critics are basically upset that I'm an ex-Muslim that has turned out to be not anti-Muslim enough. So that's one thing they like to use against me. However, I mean, I did come across like Saudis every single day in my life. We went to the market, you went to the mall, you went to wherever, the mosque. There was morality police. I've seen morality police, hit my mom's ankle with a cane.
Oh,
So it's not like I was spared these experiences. But somehow the new atheist critics in North America, they're only like behind you as an ex-Muslim if they can use your experiences to um, drive like anti-immigrant hate or anti-Muslim hate.
like
Now,
Ayan Hirsi Ali.
like Ayan Hirsi Ali. Now,
Yeah.
I did
Mhm.
not go that route. So they very quickly switched from being like, oh, Ina's experiences are so valid and she's a great ex-Muslim voice when I was focusing on criticizing Islamic conservatism to immediately finding ways to discredit me.
So
So,
there are two things here. Just to find out something from you regarding that. So this is something we are also facing in Kerala. We are very vocal critics of right-wing
mhm,
extremism, radicalism. At the same time, we are against Islamophobia, and at
mhm,
the same time, we are against Islamic fundamentalism.
mhm,
So there is this always this tension between, let's say, people who are um, who are saying if you are talking about right wing and Islamophobia all the time, you're ignoring the religious fundamentalist aspects of it. You are basically invalidating religious criticism. So, which we are not doing. We are against all these things. But there is uh, this confusion regarding how do we deal with the right wing populism, which is everywhere right now, be it
mhm,
Hindutva in India, the
mhm.
Christian fundamentalism in Europe, or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's happening. It's a big issue, and at the very same time, there are people in the Muslim community who are facing the horrors of Islamic fundamentalism, and especially ex-Muslims who got out of the religion and the fundamentalists going after them.
Yeah.
So these are personal experiences which we are not at all invalidating at any point, and we are always with ex-Muslims. And we are of the opinion that Islamic fundamentalism should be criticized. But how do you find the balance? Have you encountered this problem yourself?
Yeah, of course. But I think as someone who is from the community, right, both the Muslim community and the ex-Muslim community, it's easier for me to push back and find that balance than it would be for someone who's never been part of the Muslim or ex-Muslim community, because this is how they weaponize the ex-Muslim identity to say that you must submit to everything that they're saying. Like Ayan Hirsi Ali is a major MAGA, Trumper, and just like completely unhinged right wing lunatic. However, she has some traumatic experiences
Yeah,
in her life,
yeah.
which are also debatable because she's also admitted to lying for asylum purposes. And so I'm not going to get into the details of that, but let's say that all her traumatic experiences
But we
have been.
do know that his colleague Van Gogh was murdered. We know that.
Yes, yes, we do know that, which is awful. Obviously, nobody should be attacked or harmed in any way for expressing their opinion, no matter how um, bigoted or racist one may think it is.
Yeah,
Once you use violence, I feel like then you're the person that's in the wrong,
correct.
obviously. So if they've gone, overboard and gone into incitement or it's like hate speech, then let that take its course, I guess. However, we're seeing very quickly that, these things are not dealt with in a fair manner legally either, especially probably not in India, though, obviously, violence is never acceptable, but regardless, you can separate those 2 things and say that Any sort of violent threats, any attacks, those are completely unacceptable.
Right.
However, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, her right-wing, politics are unhinged. You don't have to take her seriously at all. You could criticize her and laugh at her all day long because she's ridiculous, but you also don't have to accept that someone has attacked and killed her friend.
Exactly. But I do think Ayan Hirsi doesn't do that because we are criticizing the attack on her friend. At the same time, we do know the Norway attack that happened. But
Yes,
Ayan Hirsi opinion about that was, okay, he didn't have any other option. He said he didn't
yes,
have any other option, which might be true. She was basically sympathizing with the terrorist attack that killed about 77 people and injured about more than 300 people.
yes, you're talking about Anders Breivik, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And I mean, we see this in right wingers all the time. They do not stick to their principles across the world. They are the biggest hypocrites. And oh, I'm hearing an echo now of my own voice. Okay, I think it's gone. All right.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
right wingers are just extremely hypocritical. So that's something you just gotta be prepared about, right? They're not going to be principled people. They may scream about free speech when they're not allowed to shout their bigotry from the rooftops, but when it comes to suppressing other people's free speech, they will be the first ones to do it. And they may be all principled about calling out Islamic fundamentalists and complain about anyone that may seem to be apologizing for that. However, they'll be the first ones to make excuses for white nationalists, Christian nationalists, Nazis, whatever. I mean, we see that with Sam Harris too. The way that he's criticized jihadism, he's talked about their publications, ISIS publications, that even if it's propaganda, we need to take them at their word. But when it came to neo-Nazi attacks in the US, he's like, can we even be sure that it's really a legitimate ideology? Maybe they were just trolling. Maybe they were
Didn't
just
he say? Didn't he say something like regarding the Christchurch attack that we're not sure whether it's driven by ideology or just for fun or something like that?
yeah, online trolling.
Yeah, online trolling, something like that. That's a big terrorist attack, and he's saying, "Oh
Yeah,
no!" And he wrote about a 300-page manifesto or something, and he's saying, "Oh,
exactly.
yeah,
He specified all his goals, the terrorist did, and he put it very clearly what his ideology was. But Sam Harris, found it fit to be worse than some of the most blatant Islamist apologists I've ever come across. And even now, when it comes to the genocide of Palestinians, you will see him loudly supporting violence. You will see him write articles titled, Sometimes Violence Really is the Answer, glorifying attacks that have killed children, babies. And imagine if that was a Muslim person doing that. It would be treated so differently.
yeah, exactly." So yeah, so back to our initial discussion, where on how you ever struggled yourself on finding the balance between criticizing Islamophobia and criticizing Islamic fundamentalism. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I have it can be disorienting at first, especially when you're starting to notice things that are like off in the new atheist scene. But once you get a picture of what that landscape is like and the kinds of identity politics weaponization that these people use, then you found your bearings. I think it's pretty easy to navigate it once you understand. I understand the initial disorienting effect, especially for people outside of the Muslim or ex-Muslim community. Like I was saying, they will always throw Ayan Hirsi Ali, be like, "Oh yeah, well, you can't discredit her because she's gone through so many, traumatic experiences. She's a black ex-Muslim woman. What else? I thought you progressives liked that." And it's like, you guys are just the biggest caricatures of the types of identity politics that you claim that leftists use, you know?
Mhm.
Once you figure that out, it's, fairly simple, I think, to navigate, but
Right.
you have to be prepared. Because if you're, like, say, a white person and someone throws in your face that it's racist to criticize Ayaan Hirsi Ali, you might feel like, "Oh," a little bit taken off guard, like, "Oh my gosh, am I being racist? Am I invalidating her experiences?" But then I think once you become more familiar with her, it's like Candace Owens, she's another character. I've heard people try to silence critics of her by saying that they're racist because they're white and she's black. And it's like, no, she's an unhinged conspiracy theory, white nationalist apologist, anti-Semite. You can absolutely criticize her, no matter the color of her skin.
Right, right. And I do think it's not like a dichotomy. You either stand with, uh, uh, you either talk against Islamophobia. It's like you can talk against Islamophobia and you can also talk against Islamic fundamentalism at the same time, I believe, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think you just have to keep the political climate in mind, right? So
Context, yes, yes, yes.
if I was an ex-Muslim in Palestine currently, and I
Yeah.
was seeing the just sheer volume of genocidal rhetoric
Mhm.
um, about Muslims and the generalizations and
Right,
trying to paint them as barbaric, perhaps that would not be the time to focus all my um, anger and direct it like towards just focusing on criticizing the Islamic right or whatever.
right.
Because you're just trying to survive at that point, right? And
Exactly.
I felt that way a little bit, like, during the Trump years too. Like, I'm always happy to criticize, Islamic fundamentalism, but when people are using that to paint people like me, my family, people who are really not at all fundamentalists as with the same brush as, like, ISIS, then I don't want to be lending my voice to that.
Right. It's a it's a dangerous situation too, to do that. And
Well, yeah. I mean, here in Ontario, there was a family that was murdered just because a car like saw them walking on the sidewalk and they looked Muslim and he just drove into them and the entire family was murdered.
exactly.
Just horrifying.
Yeah, I think a few weeks back, an incident happened in India. That's a Muslim person was found to be eating beef, and he
Yeah.
was murdered. It's nothing new in India. It happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
It happens. It has happened many number of times. So it happened like a few weeks back, and that's not what's surprising. What's surprising is the police. What they did was they they send the meat for lab testing to check whether it's beef or not. And they said, okay, they found out it's not beef and they'll be submitting this report in the court of justice. I mean, what has that got to do with anything? If it's beef, is it okay to kill him?
Yeah.
Or if it's not beef, it's not okay to kill him. What are you
Right,
trying to
right.
prove, right? So
Yeah.
that's the situation in India. So, like you said, I am of the same opinion. You can criticize Jewish religion, but not in 1930s Germany, but at the very same time, my confusion arises from the difficulties that ex-Muslims or generally Muslims experience from inside their own community, and I do think there needs to be some kind of a balance in doing both these things while keeping what you just said, keeping the political climate in mind, right?
Well, I feel like many of them are not motivated to do that. So what we see is a lot of love bombing from the right, and they get embraced by the right. They get incentives from the right, financial and social, and they just lean in. They lean into that wholeheartedly, and we see it time and time and time again. It's not
Exactly.
easy to resist that kind of temptation, though if you are a principled person, you should be like, "Well, why should I team up with other kinds of religious fundamentalists
Right.
But that's the situation we find ourselves in. That's why we have Ion Hercieli comically converting to Christianity now.
Okay, let's talk about New Atheist movement, your association with them, and what happened. How did you initially realize there is something wrong here?
Yeah, so I was telling you earlier that I think I was vulnerable to falling for it because of my background and the trauma and the anger that I had left over. And when I found it initially, I hadn't experienced a community of atheists before. I was used to like being quiet about my dislike of religion. And then I found a place where I didn't have to be quiet about it, and it felt great initially. And I thought, wow, these
My own
people are,
my own community, right?
yeah, these people are on the right side of things. And then very, very quickly, I saw it devolve from let's criticize these verses of scripture, which seem super outdated and misogynistic, to what about the hordes of Muslim men coming to rape our white women? You know, and that is just like white nationalist rhetoric. And
And then
um,
Sam Harris say something like the leftist women are even willing to get raped themselves, something like that.
yes, yes,
Like, oh,
famously
horrible.
or infamously, he said it on my podcast and left me in silence. I
So
didn't.
that was in your podcast.
It was
Okay.
in my podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, because I was talking to him about this white nationalist adjacent person that he had been promoting like content from, like interviews of. And I was like, well, she's such a lunatic. She said this, that um, something like white women are
They are
something about that, like white
yeah,
women and rape.
they are willing to get raped by the immigrants.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
as not to be called racist.
yeah, something like that. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
Oh my God,
and
that's too
and I
horrible.
thought for sure he would be like, "Oh, really? Did she say that? Oh, goodness me. Okay, well, let me rethink my retweeting of those interviews." In fact, no, he doubled and tripled down and was like, "Yeah, but they are." And I was like, "What?" If you just hear, because at that point when I was interviewing him, I was still like holding on to the hope that I had misunderstood and I was going to clarify a lot of things. Like he was really a good guy that was just not communicating or not knowing who he was associating with. And I would just show him these things and he would totally be like, "Oh, yeah, yikes." But it was
But now
really eye-opening because he was like doubling and tripling down.
I think that was in 2016 that he talked to you, right?
Yes.
And in your podcast with him, he also said something bizarre. He said in 20 years you can see a civil war happening in France, and half the people dying. There's a 50-50 chance, so that's like 12 more years for a civil war in France. Where,
Yeah,
it,
yeah, where majority of the population was gonna be Muslim or something like that.
yeah. So he was basically promoting the great replacement theory that's
Yes.
done by Douglas Murray and stuff, right?
Yes, and neo-Nazis,
Yep,
like the guy who did the Christchurch shooting.
exactly. So ideologically, I do find all these people in the same, in the same side. So
Yeah,
it's a yeah, from what I think, it's basically the new atheist movement was a scam. It was not about atheism at all, I believe. It was about
100%.
hating Muslims. It was about hating, the entire
And
the,
once the pressure is off Muslims, you can see them go after other minorities. It's just a Western chauvinist project, really. It's about hating immigrants in general. It's about hating trans people. It's about, all kinds of minorities,
yeah. Let me give you
feminists.
some background regarding the new atheist movement that happened in our state, Kerala.
Yeah.
So Kerala is quite. I'm not sure whether you know much about Kerala or not. Do you know?
Like I know a very minimal amount about South
It's quite
India.
distinct from India in many aspects, culturally. Um,
So most of Keralites are expatriates. Most of them work in Middle East
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, and other countries. So it's quite distinct culturally from the other states. I mean, each states in India is distinct from each other, to be honest.
Right.
But in Kerala, we have a
But I
very rich
always understood it to be less extreme, right?
It was, but not anymore. That's the trouble. It used to be a very harmonious place. I mean, compared to other places, it used to
Yeah.
be very religious harmony used to exist. But these these agents are actually, the communalism has spread in Kerala too at this point. So basically, what happened is we had a very rich history of
Sorry,
rationalist
what
movement
what
in
has
Kerala,
what has spread in Kerala?
uh, communalism, not
Communalism?
communism, communalism.
Yeah, that's what I was like, "Wait a minute."
Yeah, actually, communism is also there. We have a communist government right now. Um, so basically, what I'm trying to say here is we have a very rich history of rationalist movement.
Okay.
There are people who revolted against caste system, social hierarchies,
Right.
and there are many good people who talked against all these divisions in human society. And so we have a very good background in rationality, morality, and all these things. But and it was this movement was basically led by what we call as rationalists, and
Uh-oh.
yeah, and here comes new atheists, and they came to the scene around 2010, I believe, and it happened
Now
by
how did that happen? Did
so they,
they
they got influenced by Richard Dawkins. That's what happened.
Ah,
Dawkins, Sam Harris.
Jesus.
So people with the advent of internet, people started watching their videos, and they are actually believing what they are saying to be true. I mean, you and I believe at some point that new atheism is going to save the world, right? Just like that, but they never escaped it. so, so, so what happened is they started translating books from Richard Dawkins. They started talking what Sam Harris is talking,
Oh, no.
and there's a good Muslim uh, um, um, population in Kerala. About 26% of our community are Muslims. So there's a big community of Muslims in
Mhm.
in Kerala compared to the rest of India, and we lived in relative happiness. There was no religious tension or anything. There is religious fundamentalism in all religions, but apart from that, there was no problems between these religions that stood out, uh, except a few incidents.
What about eating
So
meat? Because from what I know, like, my mom's South Indian friends are always less strict about the meat eating thing than her North Indian Hindu friends. Is that
right,
correct? Is that
that is true. There is definitely that difference. We used to be less religious extreme down south.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and these new atheist movement people, they started talking about atheism, which is fine, but slowly as the new atheism evolved, they also evolved. So uh, comes Jordan Peterson, and they started
Oh,
talking
no.
about what Jordan Peterson is saying: Pareto principle, hierarchy among humans,
Oh,
all
no.
these things. So yeah, so that right wingery has engulfed
So
this
we
new
go
atheist movement in
from
Kerala.
rejecting the caste system to embracing Jordan Peterson's,
Exactly. So
societal
yeah,
hierarchies.
so what they do is, instead of rejecting, I mean, it's like a colorblind thing that happens in the West. People
Mhm.
say, "Oh, we are not looking at color. Let's let's be colorblind, right?"
While
so
being the most reactionary racist that they can be.
exactly. So that means you are ignoring the problems faced by
Yeah.
some people, some groups, right? Similarly, here what they're saying is, let's be caste blind.
No,
So
no.
yeah, so their argument is we are giving affirmative action. We have a system called reservation in India. So
Yeah.
basically, that's a type of an affirmative action where people who are historically considered as a lower caste are given post education
Right.
grants. So they started speaking against it. They're saying, oh, if you're doing it, that means it's perpetuating the caste system. We need to be caste blind. So
Oh,
these are
no. Oh,
actually
no. So
yeah,
they're like
So
Turning
these
it
are actually the
around.
same thing that they
Oh
are saying
my
in the West
god.
about
That
race,
is
right?
wild.
Yeah. So every single thing regarding feminism. So these people used to be feminists. They used to talk about feminism. I mean, at least in the beginning. But then they slowly started saying, "Oh, feminism is actually identity politics. It's not good. Let's be humanist."
Oh
All these things.
no.
So the very same thing that happened in the New Atheist movement in the West, it started happening in our own small state, and they started getting some clout. People started following them because they are trying to say they don't have any politics. They are not left. They are not
Mm.
right. They just follow the facts. Facts don't care about your
Oh my
feelings.
god, this is exactly the same things.
Same thing.
Wow.
Same thing. And the funny part is not that. Okay. Now they are starting to align with the Hindutva movement. That's the right
Perfect.
wing extremism
Full
in India.
circle.
Horrible, right?
I mean, they followed the New Atheist playbook to a T, though, right? You start off
Exactly.
being rational and acting like you're pushing back against these things, and then you turn the tables and say, actually, criticizing racism or caste is perpetuating racism or casteism. And then you say, pushing back against feminism is identity politics, and then you come full circle and join hands with the religious fundamentalists. Perfect.
Yeah. So we know that and Hirsiali is also a Christian right now. And Dawkins is saying, "Oh, I'm a cultural Christian, and Christianity can be a bulwark against other
Yes.
religious fundamentalism like Islam." He
Yeah.
said all those things, right?
And
And
Douglas
oh, another
Murray
another aspect is
also.
the gender politics. So they are basically transphobes, to be honest, but
Yes.
they don't admit it. And what they say is, "Oh, as per biology, there is only two
Oh,
sexes."
they do that in Kerala as well?
Yeah, they do here.
But what about, like, the rich South Asian history of accepting, like, third
They
gender
don't
or
outright say that they don't accept. What they're saying is, "Oh, this is going too extreme. We support LGBTQ community, but it's going a little overboard, isn't it?" That's
Ah,
what they're saying.
okay, okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they say what Dawkins is saying. There's only two sexes. You have to
Yeah.
look at the science. Science solves everything.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'll read you something regarding here's a post that someone this post is originally in our language called Malayalam,
Uh-huh.
but I'll read a few lines from that post. So
Okay.
this is written by someone who is very active in the this new atheist movement in Kerala, and this is what he has written: Atheist Hindu. Atheist Hindutva is not a new thought. Any modern philosopher who tries to integrate Hinduism has recognized and marked the existence of atheist Hindu. So, an atheist Hindu is a person who identifies himself culturally, ethnically, traditionally as a Hindu, but does not believe in personal or supernatural God or deities. So, he goes
Yeah.
on and on.
Yeah, I had my first encounter with these Hindu nationalist, atheist Hindus like a few years ago
Oh,
online.
you had. You already had. Great.
I had a few actually. And now I'm talking like probably in like 2014, 2015. Um there was like these accounts that would do these rotations of who is it was like in the innocent early days of Twitter. Like the countries would have these accounts where someone would take over the account and do like a whole week and then introduce them to your content and things like that. So there was a Pakistani account which rotated different Pakistani content creators. And at that time, I wasn't a podcaster, I was just a blogger.
Okay.
And I think one of the Indian pages invited me.
Oh,
So when I was doing my rotation on that, I got attacked. Firstly, because they said, "Oh, she's Pakistani," so everyone was like, "Oh, Muslim." Oh, they started like trolling me with like pictures of pork and like just
yeah.
things like I don't know, booze, and I was like, "Really? I'm not offended, buddy. Like, I'm not religious at all." And then they were taken back aback a bit, and then, I started saying some critical things about hijabs and niqabs, and
Now they're
l
happy.
then they were very happy. But then now looking back at that, I can sort of understand more why, like, Indian leftists were pushing back at me so hard. But at that time, I did not understand it at all. I was like, "But you guys are happy to push against your conservative traditions as feminists, so why can't, um, someone of Muslim background do the same, right?" Like, but I get it now. I get it totally. Like, the climate in India was just, you know, that these uh, horrific anti-Muslim vultures would come and prop you up for that, and um, basically use anything to hate on Muslims.
Right. Yeah,
But
this hate politics is not, it's not helping at
at
all, be
yeah,
it from
at
any
that
side.
time, it was so confusing to me because so many people, the second I was critical of Islam, they would be like applauding me. Then I
Applauding.
would be like, I'm actually
Isn't it
critical.
just the same that a new atheist did,
Yes,
right?
exactly. But I didn't fully understand that about new atheism at that time, and I certainly didn't understand that about Hindu nationalism at
Yeah,
that time. So then I'd be like, "But I'm critical of, like, all religions." And then they would start to get defensive. "What do you mean? What's wrong with it's only the Abrahamic religions that are bad." That was, like, a major theme as well, like, "Fine, bash the Abrahamic religions, but not the non-Abrahamic religions. Eastern religions are the good ones, and there's nothing harmful in those." And,
right.
um
I just wanted to ask you one question regarding hijab. So I think I've heard you say somewhere that hijab is used as it's a symbol of oppression, but at the same time, in some contexts, it's a symbol of freedom.
Yes,
So can you
yeah.
elaborate on it?
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, it really depends on the context. In Saudi Arabia, it's obviously not a symbol of freedom because you are or were
Or in
uh,
Iran? Yeah.
or in Iran obligated by the state to wear it. So it's an oppressive garment. But here in the West, in a post 9/11 climate, particularly, and now with the added like genocide of Palestinians, you can understand that with everything and all the hatred that visibly Muslim women get, particularly, it is someone's identity. They are taking a stand and willing to visibly take a stand against those oppressive policies and those oppressive views, those racist views that would judge someone to be like a terrorist just for having a headscarf. I didn't in the Palestinian context, like, it's been so, like, emotional and bizarre for me to observe because I see, like, the people that are praying in the rubble of a mosque, right?
Right.
And the guy who says the call to prayer, his voice is breaking because he's crying, and it's just such a different context,
Mhm.
and it's, like, such a brave fight against, like, the IDF that is out to destroy every symbol of their existence.
Yeah.
So, I've learned to see it in a wider context than the one of my own personal experience.
Yeah, I understand 100% what you're saying, but somehow this is, not being related to some of our friends in the liberal circles. They say, no, hijab is always a sign of oppression, but it's not really because, just like you said, I've seen there was in a nearby state of Kerala called Karnataka, there was a hijab ban at some point.
Yeah.
People were banned from wearing hijab while they were going to school or something. So there were women who were coming wearing hijabs, and you know, they they were very defiant.
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of Hindutva goons surrounding them, harassing them. But
Yeah.
even in their face, they are very defiant. So
Yeah.
there it's not it cannot be seen as a symbol of oppression. It's a part of their identity, and
Exactly.
they are fighting back.
Exactly.
yeah. So I understand it, but unfortunately, not many people do.
Well, and also the people that muddy some of the other people that muddy the waters are the religious conservatives who will take their privilege of choice and extend it onto other women who don't have a choice,
Yeah.
right? So you have a history of the waters being muddied. But yes, as you say, there are hijab bans in the West, in India, and women are defiantly uh, standing up against it. That is an entirely different act from being forced to wear it, you know?
Yeah. So just coming back to the new atheist movement, is it safe to say it died? I'm thinking it died down because I don't think anybody is now following Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins
Oh
for the
no, their
atheism they
platforms
preach.
are bigger than ever, though. It's just not rallying around atheism as much.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to say. They are not speaking of again. I mean, for atheism, their whole vibe is about anti-woke, anti-leftist,
Yeah,
anti-Islamophobic, right?
so they're just rebranding. But
Exactly.
I think New Atheism transformed. It didn't die. Like, it's a mistake to think that it's,
Or can we
harmful
safely say
effects.
that there's a Saloon article saying new atheism merged with the far right, uh, but I don't
I don't
think
know if you
merge
know
is
my
a
history with that article,
yeah.
but
I don't even know merge is a good word here because
oh,
merging
no.
means two things
Okay,
coming together to become a bigger thing, right?
hang
What
on.
I'm thinking is it's more like alt-right acquired new atheism.
Oh,
They
acquired.
the,
Okay,
the
yeah.
new atheist movement dissolved in alt-right.
So, there was a major controversy, like, I think back in 2021, where
Mm,
some of the so-called liberal, bro podcasters of the new atheist scene who still attach their identities too much to atheism, who still brand themselves as
mhm,
atheists, like, first and foremost, and
mhm,
use that to make their money. They got really, really upset when that article was published. And I did like a small first like episode, not naming anyone, not calling anyone out, but responding to one of those bros and
mhm.
debunking all his like excuses because they had the silliest excuses like new they also took issue with the word merged but in the opposite direction to what you were saying.
Yeah.
So like
How
they
can
were
you say that, right?
how can you say that there's no overlaps? They were making all sorts of excuses, and, if you I can send you links. You should go back and listen to my episodes on that drama. It was really funny. But yeah, that was a controversy for a few months. But as time goes on, we see them overlap more and more and more and more, so there's just no grounds to deny
So,
the
so to draw
overlaps.
parallels to it, in Kerala, so the new atheist movement started as spreading atheism and also debunking pseudo scientific, I mean pseudo medicine, all these things.
Right, right.
Right now their whole agenda is anti-woke. Wokeism is destroying the world. We
Oh
should
god.
rally against wokeism. Okay, what is wokeism? It means you are standing for social justice, which is bad somehow.
It's the same thing. Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And
Yeah,
what's
so
funny is when they start off like with the debunking pseudoscience, then they end up going into the pseudoscience because then they start doing race science.
oh,
They s-
wow. Yeah, that's something I wanted to talk to you. Sam Harris endorsing Charles Murray on the
yeah,
pseudoscience belief that some races have less IQ. Oh my God.
yeah, yeah.
That is, I mean, if someone else does it, I can understand, someone else without a science background. Oh, maybe he's saying the truth. But Sam Harris, I think he has a PhD in some kind of biological science. He shouldn't be doing that.
He's a neuroscientist
Yeah,
supposedly, but I mean, there are stories.
yep. And to be honest, the new atheist circles that I encounter here, they're also saying the same thing. I mean, there is IQ, definitely. There is merit difference between different groups, these
Do
things.
they do
They're
caste and IQ?
they haven't said that out loud, but people who sympathize with them, the incel, the meninist groups,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
sympathize, who join hands with them, they are
yeah,
happy to hold hands together, right?
yeah.
They they do say that out loud. They do say that in India there's a caste hierarchy where a caste called Brahmins are traditionally considered as
Oh my
on
god,
the
yes,
higher ladder,
yes.
and there is some I think his name is Lin, some
Yep,
racist scientist
yeah,
who is obsessed with this
yep.
race and IQ. So he did some study in India, and he concluded that, oh yeah, like Jews are intelligent in India, Brahmins are most intelligent. But this guy is funded by racists. We all know that
Yeah,
he's not
yeah,
a scientist.
yeah.
So yeah, so
I
the
just did a
incel men in
3-part
his group.
I just
Sorry,
did a 3-part series on race science.
wow, you did,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
Yeah, so basically these incel men in this group, they started saying out loud, yeah, this is the reason why Jews are getting Nobel Prizes. This is the reason why Brahmins are, on top of the ladder, which is just BS and it's pseudoscience.
yeah.
And not just that, they use science for just the way Jordan Peterson says some scientific BS, right? For example,
Like
what is
lobsters.
it, the the lobster thing?
Yeah,
He says lobsters have these hierarchies, so human
yeah,
should have
yeah,
too.
yeah.
So just the same way, uh, in Kerala, some people say, okay, yeah, these hierarchies are justified, and they use different scientific explanations. Like sometimes they say Pareto principle, the 80-20 law, if you are familiar with it.
No.
So they say, yeah, it's a Jordan Peterson talking point. So he says 20% of the people hold 80% of the wealth because they are
Oh,
special.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so they say all these scientific pseudo-scientific beliefs, they started out as a debunking pseudo medical beliefs, all these things, which is good, especially in India. But they are what they stand right now is spreading all these pseudo-scientific things too. Okay,
Yeah.
let's talk about what we can do. It's a very difficult scene where we are in, where we see right-wing populism emerging everywhere, and Islamophobia is not just in India; it's everywhere. So
Yeah.
whenever I speak with people, somehow the conversation topic comes to Muslims, and somehow I end up finding, okay, they are Islamophobic, so
Yeah.
which is very sad. And it's a very difficult situation, um, and there's this problem of religious fundamentalism still existing at the same time. And so all these problems, how can we effectively counter them? I mean, we are I don't know, um, we understand the problem, but what's the solution? What can we do?
I think just speaking up and also identifying the problems and the tactics that they use and kind of simplifying that and putting it out as a message so that people can understand. Because as I was saying, sometimes these tactics are disorienting, right? Because they'll use social justice language or they'll flip the narrative and be like, no, actually, it's perpetuating casteism to criticize casteism. So if I think the first step is to just identify these tactics and then put them out as vocally as you can so that more and more people can understand.
So
Um,
you do an amazing work at it, to be honest, because I think your conversations did help. I mean, not just conversations, your tweets did
mm,
help me get out of my new atheist phase. So
glad to hear it.
yeah, I remember I was in Twitter under fake ID, and I used to retweet Dawkins, Sam Harris, and whatnot. And
Hmm.
I used to interact with them too. And then slowly I realized, okay, no, these people are saying something else that I don't want to say. So
Hmm.
you, you're you're uh, you did help me, to be honest, in that regard. And I think you're helping many people realize the same thing, the same way that I realized. So you're doing
Good.
amazing work. Your podcast series, you lay out what they're saying, just like the way you told. So
Hmm.
Sam Harris has this demeanor of a very rational,
Hmm.
I'm speaking facts kind of persona, but he's not. He is being
Yeah.
biased. He's very biased, and
Yep.
he speaks in a way that makes people feel like, oh, this guy is intelligent. What he's saying makes sense, making sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are figures like that in Kerala also. They speak very eloquently. They are good orators, and people do fall for it. People just
Yeah.
see, oh, this person knows everything, so he's a
Yeah.
polymath. So what he must be saying should also be true. Without
Right. Well,
checking
I'm
themselves.
glad that you guys are debunking that stuff or having a
We are doing our fair
podcast.
share, to be honest.
Yeah. That's
But
great.
but they are a bigger group because the right wing
Of
extremism is
course.
it's everywhere.
Of
We
course.
are the
Always.
minority here, but we
Yeah.
need to fight back.
Same, honestly. I mean, the new atheists, the right-wing atheists, they're a much bigger group than the people that criticize them. And then now we also have like a crop of centrists that are posing as like critics, but actually they're like laundering people like Sam Harris, There's like podcasts that are like, "Oh, sometimes he goes too far, but like, he's not that bad. He's not racist like people say."
Right,
You know?
right. And
So
yeah, same thing. It's a liberal thought process that um, the freedom of speech should be absolute. He should be able to tell whatever bullshit he wants to say.
I mean, he should be able to say to, he should be able to say his nonsense, but then he shouldn't whine about people pointing out
Criticizing.
how bigoted it is. Yes. He has been doing episodes called Anti-Zionism is Anti-Semitism.
Wow.
Like, come on. This is a guy who pretends like Islamophobia is not a real thing because he's so afraid of people weaponizing the term Islamophobia to silence criticism of Islam. But here he
Exactly.
is.
Yeah. Exactly.
Here
They
he
don't
is.
accept the fact that it's a UN approved. There's a day that UN follows for Islam against Islamophobia, March 15th or something, and they are saying that Islamophobia doesn't exist at all. The term
Oh,
itself
well,
doesn't
they're
make
saying the
sense at all.
UN is like Hamas. So
They are seeing that now. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So they're delegitimizing everything basically. And it's just yeah. Sometimes Sam Harris sounds like Alex Jones, but he just puts it in better words, but he's saying the same kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
you know?
It's not. Yeah. It's not just the new atheists are you know um, they are basically using Jordan Peterson now. I've told you
Yeah.
that, right? They-
Yeah, just like the
For an
new
atheist
atheist did.
movement, Jordan Peterson is the poster boy. Can you believe it?
I can believe it because that's what happened here, right? Sam Harris embraced him and uplifted his voice so many times.
No, he's wrong about God, but he's right about so many other
So
things.
many other things. Yeah, he said something like, I agree with about 90% of what he says. Can you imagine? Like, Jordan Peterson is completely unhinged. He is yelling at like paper towel dispensers and shit. Have you seen him do that on
No, I haven't.
Twitter? He's like he gets angry if like there's like, "Oh, please try to conserve and don't waste paper towels in a public washroom." He will start
What?
being outraged about that because he's like, "You don't tell me what to do." I'm like, "It's a sign, man. Do
Oh
what you
yeah, I
want."
think I've seen it. Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all these people they speak so high regard of science, but when COVID hit, they are all
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh no, vaccination is a problem. That's
Yeah.
how I think Sam Harris left the IDW sphere, right?
Yes, but then, something that a lot of people like to say, well, at least he didn't turn out to be as bad as his other IDW cohorts. Like, he's not an anti-vaxxer. However, he became towards the end a bit of a vaccine centrist.
Vaccine
Like
centrist. Oh, there is a centrist position there too.
everywhere.
Oh my
Um,
God.
he started saying to, I think it was to Bill Maher, who is an
Uh-huh,
anti-vaxxer. He
uh-huh.
was on his show. He's like, yeah, yeah, I wouldn't get a COVID booster now. And I think masking was such a bad idea. I think masking children was such a bad idea. It's like,
Okay.
dude,
All right, let's
you
wrap it up today. It was amazing to talk to you regarding all these things. I found it informative from our side too. And yeah, and let's keep up the good fight against right wing and the
yeah.
new atheist movement, which is indistinguishable these days.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure talking to you and really fascinating to hear about the parallels.
Yeah,
So many parallels.
absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Ina.